What if I told you that history is full of moments so bizarre, they sound completely made up? A man who survived 3 shipwrecks on the same river. 2 presidents, born 100 years apart, with eerily identical lives. And deaths. These aren't conspiracy theories. They're real events. And once you hear them, you'll start to wonder. Is history just random, or is something bigger at play? Which of these coincidences blows your mind the most? Let me know in the comments. Before you hear the strangest one of all, the United States has had 46 presidents, but 2 of them, Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy, share a list of parallels so eerie that people still debate whether it's pure chance or something else. It starts with the basics. Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. Kennedy was elected to Congress in 1946. Exactly 100 years later, Lincoln became president in 1860. Kennedy became president in 1960. Again, exactly 100 years later. So far, it's a neat coincidence. But we're just scratching the surface. Their personal lives? Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy, who warned him not to go to the theater the night he was assassinated. Kennedy had a secretary named Lincoln, who warned him not to go to Dallas the day he was assassinated. Their assassinations? Lincoln was shot in the back of the head in a theater called Ford's Theater. Kennedy was shot in the back of the head in a Lincoln convertible made by the Ford Motor Company. Their killers? Lincoln's assassin, John Wilkes Booth, was born in 1839. Kennedy's assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, was born in 1939. Exactly 100 years later, Booth ran from the theater to a warehouse after the shooting. Oswald ran from a warehouse to a theater after the shooting. Both assassins were killed before they could stand trial. And it keeps going. Lincoln had a vice president named Andrew Johnson, born in 1808. Kennedy had a vice president named Lyndon Johnson, born in 1908. Lincoln's successor was named Johnson. Kennedy's successor was named Johnson. And both men were Southern Democrats. When historians compile these parallels, they admit most could be chalked up to probability and pattern seeking. But the sheer volume makes it feel uncanny. There's even a strange psychological effect at play. Once people hear about 1 or 2 similarities, they start looking for more, noticing details they might otherwise ignore. For example, both men had 4 children. Both were known for their civil rights work, and both were assassinated on a Friday in the presence of their wives. The spooky question is, do these coincidences mean anything? Or are they simply statistical anomalies we give meaning to, because humans hate randomness? Some theorists, the more conspiracy-minded, have suggested a reincarnation cycle, claiming Kennedy was a continuation of Lincoln's mission. Others point to patterns in American politics, almost like an unseen rhythm every century. The truth is, the human brain is hardwired to find connections, sometimes too hardwired. But even skeptics admit, if you stacked up all these parallels, without naming the presidents, you'd probably assume they were the same person, told in 2 separate time periods. And there's a final twist most people don't know. In the last speech he gave before his assassination, Lincoln said, "I have a strange feeling I shall not outlast the week." In the last speech Kennedy gave before his assassination, he said, "We are not here to curse the darkness, but to light the candle that can guide us through that darkness." Different words, same feeling, the sense that their time was running out. These parallels have fascinated people for decades. You could chalk it up to coincidence, but in the end, maybe that's the point. History loves to repeat itself, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in echoes loud enough to hear across 100 years. So, what do you think? Are Lincoln and Kennedy just a string of coincidences, or is there something deeper connecting them? When the RMS Titanic sank on April 15, 1912, over 1,500 people died. Among the survivors was a young man named Violet Jessup. Yes, man might not be the right word here, because Violet was actually a woman, a stewardess and nurse who would later earn the nickname Miss Unsinkable. But her survival wasn't just about the Titanic. Her story defies odds so wildly that mathematicians struggle to calculate them. Violet Jessup worked for the White Star Line, a company that operated some of the largest ocean liners in the world. In 1911, she was aboard the Olympic, the Titanic's sister ship, when it collided with a British warship, the HMS Hawke. The Olympic was badly damaged but stayed afloat. Violet walked away unharmed. 1 year later, she boarded the Titanic. As a stewardess, she remembered the freezing air, the chaos, and the sound of the ship splitting. She was ordered into Lifeboat 16, where she was handed a baby to look after until rescue. She survived. Again, you might think surviving 2 maritime disasters in 2 years would be enough for anyone. Not for Violet. During World War I, she served as a nurse aboard the Britannic, the Titanic's other sister ship, which was converted into a hospital ship. On November 21, 1916, the Britannic struck a mine in the Aegean Sea and began to sink. Violet jumped overboard but was sucked under by the ship's propellers. She only survived because the water pressure forced her back up. With a fractured skull. To recap, survived the Olympic collision, 1911. Survived the Titanic disaster, 1912. Survived the Britannic sinking, 1916. 3 of the largest ships in history at the time, all disasters. 1 woman walked away from them all. The statistical odds? Maritime experts estimate the chance of a passenger being on one of those ships during a disaster is astronomical. Being on all 3? It's almost a mathematical impossibility. Some say Violet had uncanny instincts. She once told friends she always packed her toothbrush and a small bag of essentials within reach, just in case. Others joke she was a bad luck charm for the White Star Line, but Violet herself didn't see it as supernatural. She wrote in her memoirs, "I survived because I kept doing my job." The eerie part? That baby she rescued on the Titanic? Decades later, a woman called her, claiming to be that baby, and simply said, "We both survived." In a world obsessed with avoiding danger, Violet seemed to step straight into it and walk away every time. Whether it was fate, chance, or sheer stubbornness, she became a living reminder that sometimes survival is more about showing up than running away. So, was Violet Jessup just incredibly lucky, incredibly unlucky, or something else entirely? Let me know in the comments before we dive into the next bizarre true story. In 1917, during World War I, a young British soldier named Private John Trickett was sent to the front lines in France. Like many soldiers, he kept a few personal items in his breast pocket: photos, a notebook, and a small silver coin. That coin, minted in 1889, was dented and worn. It wasn't worth much, but John carried it everywhere, claiming it brought him a bit of luck. What he didn't know was that it would one day save his life. It happened on a cold, muddy morning. John's unit was advancing through no man's land when German forces opened fire. Bullets ripped through the air, soldiers dropped into the mud, and chaos erupted. John felt a sudden, brutal impact in his chest, like being kicked by a horse. He fell backward, gasping, certain he'd been shot through the heart. But when medics reached him, they found the bullet had struck the coin in his breast pocket. The coin absorbed most of the impact, bending almost in half. The bullet still bruised and cracked a rib, but it didn't pierce his heart. The odds of that? Astronomical. The bullet hit at exactly the right angle to be stopped by a piece of metal, barely an inch across. After the war, John returned home, married, and raised a family. He kept the coin for the rest of his life, showing it to his children whenever. They complained about bad luck. It became a family heirloom, the luckiest coin in England. But here's where the story takes a strange turn. In 2014, nearly a century later, one of John's descendants, his great-grandson, was cleaning out an old box in the attic. Inside, he found the coin, and alongside it, a newspaper clipping. From 1917. The headline, "Coin in Pocket Saves Soldier's Life." That might not sound strange until you realize the clipping wasn't about John Trickett. It was about another soldier from a completely different regiment who had also survived because a coin in his pocket stopped a bullet that same year. Two soldiers, same war, same year, same survival story. Both had coins minted in the same year, 1889. What are the odds? Historians say it's possible, but vanishingly rare. Soldiers did carry coins, but for two to survive in the same way, in the same year, with coins from the same year. It's the kind of coincidence that makes you wonder if the universe occasionally reuses scripts. Military. Collectors today still seek bullet coins, but authentic ones are almost impossible to find. Many were lost, buried, or melted down. John's coin remains with his family, dented and scarred, a silent witness to the moment when fate hinged on a tiny piece of silver. And there's one more eerie note. The dented side of the coin bears the image of Queen Victoria, her face forever, warped by the bullet's impact, as if even royalty had taken the hit for him. Was it luck? Fate? Or just a reminder that sometimes the smallest objects can hold the biggest stories? So, what do you think? Was John Trickett's survival pure chance? Or was that coin meant to be in his pocket that day? Let me know in the comments before we move to the next unbelievable coincidence. On August 6, 1945, the world's first atomic bomb used in warfare exploded over Hiroshima, Japan. Tens of thousands died instantly. But one man, Tsutomu Yamaguchi, lived through it, and that was just the beginning of his story. Yamaguchi was a 29-year-old engineer working for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. He was in Hiroshima on a business trip, due to return home to Nagasaki the next day. That morning, he was walking to the shipyard when he heard the drone of a bomber overhead. He looked up to see the Enola Gay, the American B-29, release a small object that drifted downward. A blinding flash lit up the sky, like the sun. Had fallen to Earth, he later recalled. The blast threw him into a nearby potato field. His eardrums ruptured, his face and arms were burned, and his body was peppered with debris. Somehow, he staggered to an air raid shelter and survived the night. The next morning, injured and in shock, Yamaguchi boarded a train back to his hometown, Nagasaki. He had no idea what awaited him. On August 9th, just 3 days after Hiroshima, Yamaguchi was at work in a Mitsubishi office in Nagasaki, telling his boss about the new kind of bomb he had seen. His boss dismissed him until another flash lit up the sky. The second atomic bomb had been dropped. Once again, Yamaguchi was less than 2 miles from ground zero. This time, his injuries were compounded, but miraculously, he survived a second atomic blast. The odds of surviving one atomic bomb are slim. Surviving two? Nearly impossible. According to historians, Yamaguchi is the only officially recognized person to have endured both. After the war, he lived a relatively quiet life, working as a translator and later becoming an advocate for nuclear disarmament. He gave interviews, sharing his first-hand experience of both bombings, not as a political argument, but as a human plea. No one should ever suffer what I have suffered. He lived to the age of 93, passing away in 2010 from stomach cancer. Unrelated, doctors said, to radiation, the eerie part. If Yamaguchi had left Hiroshima a day later, or returned to Nagasaki a day earlier, he would have been in only one of the bombed cities. If he had been just a bit closer to ground zero either time, he wouldn't have survived. His life and the strange twist of fate that placed him at the epicenter of both bombs, yet allowed him to walk away, remains one of history's most extraordinary coincidences. Some see it as sheer luck. Others wonder if he was kept alive to tell the story, to be a living warning to future generations. Either way, his tale blurs the line between chance and destiny. So, do you think Yamaguchi's survival twice was pure coincidence? Or was there a reason he lived to tell the world about it? In 1898, a little-known American author named Morgan Robertson published a novella titled Futility, or The Wreck of the Titan. It told the story of the largest ship ever built, a luxury liner called the Titan, which struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sank on a cold April night. Almost everyone on board died because there weren't enough lifeboats. 14 years later, in 1912, the Titanic, the largest ship ever built, struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sank on a cold April night. Almost everyone on board died because there weren't enough lifeboats. The similarities between Robertson's fictional Titan and the real Titanic are mind-bending. Name: Titan versus Titanic size. In the book, the Titan was 800 feet long. The Titanic was 882 feet long. Speed: both ships could reach about 25 knots. Construction: both were described as unsinkable. Passenger capacity: the Titan carried 3,000 passengers. The Titanic carried about 2,200 lifeboats. In the story, there were 24 lifeboats. In reality, the Titanic had 20. Disaster: both struck icebergs in April in the North Atlantic and nearly the same spot. Casualties: in both, more than half the passengers died. It's eerie enough to feel like prophecy. But Robertson denied any supernatural foresight. He said he simply knew ships, having worked as a merchant sailor, and designed the Titan to be the ultimate luxury liner of the era, and its demise was a warning about overconfidence in technology. Still, the parallels go further. In Robertson's book, the Titan strikes the iceberg on the starboard side at night. The Titanic? Starboard side. At night. Even the fictional Titan's speed at impact, 22.5 knots, matches the Titanic's estimated speed at the moment of collision. Some argue it was all an example of life imitating art. Robertson, after all, was writing during the height of the shipbuilding arms race, when liners were being built bigger, faster, and with fewer safety measures. A disaster, he reasoned, was inevitable, but the exactness of the details makes the story legendary among coincidence hunters. The book was largely forgotten until after the Titanic disaster, when newspapers rediscovered it and marveled at its predictive power. Overnight, Robertson went from obscure novelist to the man who predicted the Titanic. The most chilling part? In later years, Robertson wrote another story, this time about a future war involving the United States and Japan, which eerily mirrored events of World War II, including a surprise attack resembling Pearl Harbor. Was Morgan Robertson simply an author with an uncanny grasp of the future? Or was he unknowingly writing history before it happened? Either way, Futility stands as one of the most famous cases of a work of fiction aligning almost perfectly with real events, a reminder that sometimes imagination can run ahead of reality, and reality catches up. So, was Morgan Robertson's book a chilling prophecy, or just an incredibly lucky or unlucky guess? History isn't just in the past. Sometimes it's waiting to happen again. Which of these coincidences blew your mind the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe now, because the next unbelievable story might already be unfolding.